Well, I think one reason that Richard Rorty people pay so much attention to Richard Rorty is that is his kind of institutional effect and location.
I was professor of philosophy at Princeton for 20 years.
He was a very widely respected and excellent analytic philosopher.
Then I was professor of humanities at Virginia for 15 years.
Who suddenly started worrying about Dewey and Heidegger.
Then I was professor of comparative literature at Stanford for 7 years.
And if you went to philosophy grad school in an analytic department, all you were told about Dewey and Heidegger was that they were idiots, or that they didn't matter at all, and they never said anything meaningful, much less important.
You have to know I went to the University of Chicago as an undergraduate during the period of the Hutchins period, and one of my classmates at that time was Richard Rorty. But at Chicago, the attitude towards Dewey was anathema.
And so Rorty started, for one thing, just to synthesize a variety of traditions in a way, and he was a person whom the philosophical establishment couldn't quite ignore when he started to do that.
Like I said, when he wrote in the preface to his book, The Philosophy of the Mirror of Nature, that the three most important philosophers of the 20th century are Wittgenstein, Heidegger, and Dewey, I think lots of people would have thought, well, the analytic philosophers would agree with Wittgenstein, the continental with Heidegger, but nobody would have agreed that to put Dewey in the same group would be considered a category mistake.
One of my professors told me not to work on Dewey because he was dead as a doornail. And, of course, 1979 was the year that Rorty's Philosophy in the Mirror of Nature came out, and once again you could say Dewey's name in public without people acting as if you'd farted in an elevator. It was quite a change.
Both Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions and my book, Philosophy in the Mirror of Nature, were critical of a certain range of received opinion within the philosophical profession.
I think that if there's a single story that that stands out to my mind as interesting and telling, it's that Philosophy in the Mirror of Nature almost didn't get published. This kind of book, which is seen as really precipitated the revival in certain respects, especially for figures outside of philosophy, went out for peer review, and in its initial response, there were two reviewers, and one of them was effusively in support of publication. The other one, who the editor of the press had thought initially was going to be very supportive of it, concluded that the book was sloppily written, would be of interest only to analysts, and ended with the prediction that almost no one outside philosophy would have any interest in the book.
We typically had more appreciative readers outside of philosophy departments than within philosophy departments, because the people outside of philosophy who had objections to what was going on, or had objections to the prevailing currents of thought within philosophy departments, saw Kuhn and I as providing support for those suspicions and criticisms.
Rorty actually did a great service by publishing that book. It was a shock because he was regarded as one of the high priests of the analytic movement at the time. Our textbook in analytic philosophy was the one he'd edited, so that was quite a shock. It was like somebody throwing open a whole bunch of windows in a very stuffy building.
I want to be careful here because I have been engaged in argument with Rorty for almost 40 years in this, but it's an argument among friends, and I'm a great defender. I think there are ways in which people tend to caricature Rorty. I think what's at the heart of Rorty is that he's a great moralist in the best tradition of Dewey and Whitman and Emerson, and people frequently don't see that. They think he's flip and indifferent and insensitive. I think that's a complete mistake about what Rorty is about. He's a man who's deeply concerned with various serious issues.
So the question is Rorty a moralist or an ironist? Well, certainly in some of his popular writing, he's very clearly a moralist. I mean, very clearly in terms of what we liberals do, he's staking out some moral territory.
He writes widely. He writes for more than philosophers. He writes in ways that are intended to affect and represent culture in the U.S.
At the same time, he is a person who does think that there have been exaggerated claims made about the names of philosophy, and he's a great debunker.
I'm attracted to Rorty's way of thinking. I don't agree with him, and perhaps in a profound way I don't agree with him. But I do like the subversive quality of his way of getting at problems. I think that he debunks the idea that philosophy is a science, or that philosophy could be a system, or that there could be a science of science, so to say, which is philosophy, or a knowledge about how we could know, or something of that kind. These seem to me to be excellent clues. And if I may put it this way, I share with him the thought that this kind of debunking is crucial to American pragmatism.
You know, my friend Richard Rorty is a pragmatist. I think Richard Rorty is a skeptic in the, in almost the old Greek sense. You know, saying, give up this talk about truth.
Some analytic philosophers have, for example, complained about Richard Rorty's neo-pragmatism, I would say. As he no longer believes, apparently, in the objectivity of truth. Well, I would put it a different way. I would simply say, according to some of his writings at least, he seems to suggest that truth isn't really real. And the great American philosophers never said anything like that.
There is what I would sometimes call the good Rorty and the bad Rorty. I mean, he likes to be outrageous and to make claims, and then very frequently qualifies his kinds of claims. I mean, for example, he has an ambivalence. He sometimes wants to say pragmatism has nothing to do with politics. But it seems to me that a lot of his work belies it. He's informed by the pragmatic spirit, and it informs his kind of politics for it. He, wants to denigrate. He talks about the disappearance of philosophy, but there are ways in which there is another sense in which he really does. It's philosophy with a capital P. It's a traditional philosophy. It's not philosophy in terms of, say, some of the things I've been talking about in terms of vision about this. He argues as if he's impatient with argument, but he's a brilliant argument. So it's in these things that I think that sometimes he belies even the things that he says.
I think that the Socratic ideal of self-knowledge is replaced among contemporary intellectuals by the Nietzschean idea of self-creation, so that the life of the intellectual is not a matter of finding out what has been inside himself or herself all the time. It's a matter of becoming someone new. And the same for societies. Social progress is not a matter of discovering the essential nature of the state or of one's nation or of one's society. It's a matter of becoming a more rich, interesting society than in the past.